Well, joining me in the studio now is the Shadow International Trade Secretary, Barry Gardiner. Hello, thanks for being with us this morning. Now, you're not going to thank me for this, but I feel that we have got to start with the polls that are around in today's newspapers, because they don't make pretty reading for your party. We can have a look at one of them. This is the Comrades Sunday Mirror poll. 50% for the Conservatives. I mean, that is the highest percentage for any party since 2002, the highest for the Conservatives since 1991. I mean, look at this. It's going to be a bloodbath, isn't it?
Well, flick on up and you'll see the Sunday Mail, the Mail on Sunday, and they're saying that the Tory lead has halved in the latest poll from last night to 11 points. Now, look, Sophie...
I'm surprised you're celebrating an 11-point lead for the Conservatives.
No, I'm not. What I'm saying, I'm trying to show you that there's a fluctuation in what the polls are saying between a 25% and an 11%. And, I think that we have a lot of ground to cover over the next 6 or 7 weeks. I'm very confident that when people start looking not at what the polls are saying, but what the policies of each of the parties are, they're then going to say, well, actually, I don't trust the Tories on tax because I've seen what Philip Hammond wanted to do in raising NIC in the budget. They're refusing to abide by their promise that they made in 2015 in their manifesto that they wouldn't raise national insurance contribution. They're refusing to say that they won't put up VAT again. And actually, Philip Hammond, when he was last week at the IMF in Washington, he said all chancellors would like greater flexibility on tax. It's very clear they're abandoning those promises. And, I think the electorate are going to look at that. They're going to say, well, why is it they're abandoning the triple lock on pensions? This is something that people are deeply worried about because, we need to give elderly people dignity and security in retirement. No, We've committed to that, but the Tories won't.
We will come on to policy later.
Yeah, sure.
I'm keen to talk about policy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, though, if you poll the policy, Labour do quite well if you just look at the policies in isolation. But the problem is people just don't trust you. They don't believe you. And you're talking about the Mail on Sunday poll, which actually compares two different polls. So it's very difficult to draw too much onto that Mail on Sunday poll. And of course, we don't trust polls, but at the same time, the polls have never been this wrong, have they? I mean, by all accounts, you're heading for a crashing defeat.
Shall I tell you when they were last this wrong? Okay? When Donald Trump won the White House and when Jeremy Corbyn won the leadership of the Labour Party. That's when they were last this wrong. And actually, it was...
The polls? You're talking about the betting markets for Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, the betting markets and the polls. Those who thought 2 years ago that Jeremy Corbyn would become the leader of the Labour Party? And when you talk about trust...
Well, the first poll came in, that's when we started to think about it, wasn't it? When the polls of Labour members started to indicate that he would.
Let's be clear on trust. This is somebody who is leading the Labour Party now, who has been absolutely consistent over years. Many people dislike his consistency, but he's been absolutely consistent. He's never said one thing and then gone against it. He's not that sort of person. And if you look at what Theresa May is doing, within 2 years of having promised things on her manifesto at the last general election, where she was a senior member of the cabinet as Home Secretary, she's now rowing back on all the promises she's made. That's why she's called this election, because she wants to be able to get rid of those promises and actually be freed up. She thinks, here's a political opportunity to be freed up to do what I like. And it's tough. What she's going to bring in is going to be hard for British people. It's going to be hard for all our businesses in negotiating a hard Brexit, because that's what she's about. And this is going to be really, really difficult for Britain if she gets the mandate that she wants.
Now, there's one thing that I do want to ask you about, because I'm slightly confused, because back in 2008, you called for Gordon Brown to resign and call a leadership contest because, this is your words at the time, the public has stopped listening to him in 2008.
Gosh,
the polls show...
Look at my beard.
What's...
Gosh.
Good diversion tactics there, I like that.
No, but I'm shocked by the photograph. Goodness me.
You're much smarter now, Barry, don't worry. And the public has stopped listening to Gordon Brown. You said he should resign. The polls show that the public has stopped listening to Jeremy Corbyn. So why aren't you calling for him to resign? Is it just because you got a better job this time?
Play the rest of my quote there. I said it was because he had shown complete vacillation complete vacillation. I mean, if you run the rest of that quote, you'll see all the points that I made. He had said that he was going to set out his case to the British public. That's why he hadn't called the general election a year previously. And he didn't. He had vacillated on policies at that time. I wanted clear direction and strong leadership. And he wasn't offering it at that point. I have to say, 6 months later, when it came to the global financial crisis, resolving that in the G20 in London, he was brilliant. He suddenly became Superman, and he did a fantastic job there. But at the point that I called for him to go, it was because actually, I think there had been a year of real crisis, perhaps personal crisis, but also in terms of just not knowing what he wanted to do being in number 10. Jeremy Corbyn knows that very clearly. He's absolutely clear about what he wants to do in number 10 and where he wants this country to go.
Well, a very loyal response there to Jeremy Corbyn. Now, I'm keen to talk about your big policy announcement today, which is this new bank holidays, 4 new bank holidays. If things got so bad now, you're bribing voters with the idea of more time off work.
No, I don't think it's about bribing voters at all. Look, our 4 nations in the United Kingdom have really never been quite as divided as we are at the moment. And I think it's great that in Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales, they should be celebrating the 23rd of April, which, by the way... So
this is the idea of saving the union,
today,
the bank holidays.
Not only Shakespeare's birthday, but St. George's. It's also my brother's birthday, and I have to apologise on TV, if I may, that I haven't sent him a birthday card with the election last week. But I will get round to it, I promise. But it's great that we're actually talking about celebrating those things which bring us together. And having a holiday is a good way of doing that. We have less holidays than anybody else in the G20. This would only take us up to the G20 average of holidays, 12 a year. We have less than France, we have less than Germany, we've half as many as Japan, which has 16 public holidays each year, and yet they are the 3rd largest economy in the world.
And of course,
so I think we can do this, and it won't actually have to impact and affect our productivity.
Now, of course, you can only do this if you get somewhere near power. I mean, that's the same with your own brief, Shadow International Trade. I mean, Donald Trump there warning that Britain will be put back to the back of the queue when it comes to the trade deals, that the EU will be prioritised.
Yes. To
have any impact on this, you're going to have to be in power, aren't you?
Well, look, isn't that extraordinary? Now we know that when Donald Trump took Theresa May's hand at the White House, he really was walking her down the garden path. You know, at that point, people said, oh, Britain's gone to the front of the queue for a trade deal. Last week, we heard that actually we're not at the front of the queue at all. We've now gone to the back of the queue, behind the European Union, and it has already taken 4 years to try and fail to negotiate the TTIP agreement, which is between the European Union and the United States. So the idea that we are at the front of the queue has now gone. Not only that, we heard Theresa May saying that she would be quite relaxed about opening up our health services to big American healthcare companies. Now that is, this is something that people really need to understand. The way in which our country will change as a result of our change in trade policy is dramatic. They need to understand that at all levels. And if you look at what's happened just 2 days ago in the European Union, the leaked document from the Commission showed that they were now encouraging European companies, encouraging them to discriminate against British companies in tenders for European work. Now, where was the government? Where was Theresa May? She was out electioneering. It was the Labour Party that had to send a complaint about the European Commission to the European Ombudsman. The Commission is supposed to be the guardian of the treaty. The treaty says that if you're a member state, you cannot discriminate against any member state. And the Commission's supposed to guarantee that. They failed to do it. But this government completely failed to notice, did nothing about it, and it took for me to put that complaint into the Ombudsman. Because the government has lost its eye on the main deal about Brexit. The government is now looking simply to the election, and we're in the midst of a 2-year fixed period of negotiation, and Theresa May has taken 2 years out. That is arrogant
a quick thought
from Britain,
you,
and it's also reckless in terms of the negotiation.
A quick thought from you on tax as well. Clearly going to be a huge issue on this election. John McDonnell seemed to suggest that if you're on £70,000 or more, then you're rich, you could be paying more tax. Do you agree with him?
Look, members of Parliament are in that bracket. £70,000, you're in the top 5% of the population.
So you're rich.
Let's understand that the average wage in this country has gone down in real terms by 10% since 2007.
Okay.
So actually, what we're talking about is a £10 minimum wage for all those 5.6 million people at the bottom of the pile, and that will actually boost our economy because those people tend to spend their income more. And yes, I do believe that people at the top, and certainly big companies, should be paying more tax. And the way we'll do that is because we've pledged to make those very large companies have to publish their tax returns to show that they're paying exactly what tax they need to.
Now, before you go, because we haven't got too long,
okay,
I am keen to ask you this.
Can I also just say, and our late payment policy, which says that big companies will have to stop banking, using small companies as their bankers. They'll have to pay up in time instead of waiting 3 or 4 months.
Now, you've been in Parliament for a long time now, a couple of decades. You perhaps haven't quite experienced anything like what you saw this week after you gave a particularly feisty set of interviews. You were described as the chuckling assassin, as the people's Gardener.
I chuckled, didn't I?
This is one of your fans on Twitter. We can have a look at one particular Twitter post here from Smarty Sue. I love badass Baz. Is this the beginning of Baz mania?
Look, I've always said that I prefer policy to politics. And very often we get into personality politics. I don't believe in that. And I think actually what's wrong with a lot of the way in which the polls and the newspapers conduct things is that they go, you know, who's up or who's down in the personality context. I think we need to fight this election on policies, and on that basis, I think we should win.
Baz mania is over. You heard it here first. Barry Gardiner, thank you very much for that. Well